Hey everybody! Just gonna wait a couple minutes to make sure that everybody gets to come on here because we're gonna be talking all about shadow work today. I'm so excited to be sharing this topic with each and every single one of you because shadow work is something that has completely changed my life. And I know that it's something that can also completely change yours. So as you guys come on here, make sure that you let me know in the comments who you are and where you're from. Where is it in the world that you are tuning in from? Because I know that we have people in here from everywhere and I'd love to connect with each and every single one of you. Hey Casey. Yeah, as you guys come in, let me know where you're coming from. And also, I'd love to hear if you guys have ever done shadow work before, because I know that this is one of those topics that people either love or they're a little bit unsure of. I think it's because of the fact that shadow sounds scary. It's kind of an ominous word, right? But it really is not scary at all. In fact, it's going to be one of your favorite tools when you learn how to use it and master it completely. All right, so we have Kristen, she's coming in from North Texas. Hey, Texas. And where's everybody else coming in from? Scrolling up through the comments here. Let me know where it is that you're coming in from and if you've ever done shadow work before, as we give everybody a minute to show up here on this beautiful morning. I'm on the East Coast, so for me, it's actually afternoon. It's about 12 o'clock, but I know that we have people from everywhere joining in for this. Perfect. We got British Columbia. Awesome. A couple people from British Columbia. Super cool. Yeah, everybody as you're coming on, let me know if you've ever done shadow work. Danielle says she loves shadow work. Awesome. Shadow work is one of those things that before you really understand it, it can be a little scary. So I want to make sure today that you guys understand everything that there is to know about shadow work so that you feel really safe and comfortable using this amazing tool. So since it's about 7 after, I'm going to go ahead and get started now. Anybody who pops on late, we'll let them catch the replay or get any of those pieces that they need later. So for those of you guys who are totally new to my world, I'm Danielle Massi. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I am a master shadow worker, and I am a #1 best-selling author. I actually just made the announcement yesterday that I have a new book coming out with Barnes & Noble's publishing house. It's going to be called Shadow Work. You can actually pre-order it now on Amazon. The links are all on my Facebook page that you guys can follow me on right after this. I'm super excited to be sharing that with you. I also have a shadow work journal that you guys can pick up. It's called the Shadow Seekers Journal. This one's been out for about a year, so you can start doing that work for yourself. Now let me go back in. I've got people from Iowa coming in here. Love that. Rachel from Alberta, Canada. So many people from Canada this morning. Super fun. Okay, so let's talk about shadow work. What is it? So shadow work is something that has been around for probably longer than we can really conceptualize because it's a practice that is pretty innate to who we are as individuals. But the first person to coin the term shadow work is Carl Jung. He's the one who came up with it in 1863, and he started integrating it into his psychotherapy practice. Now, if you guys know anything about Freud and Jung, they were really into understanding the mind, but they made some pretty lofty claims about stuff just based on their observations without doing any real research. So when Carl Jung started talking about the shadow, it was something that people kind of clung to, not because they understood it, but because it was a sexy concept at the time. And the shadow was what he referred to as the unconscious mind. Now, since then, there's been plenty of research to validate the fact that we all have an unconscious. And the unconscious is the part of your consciousness that is hidden really, really far below the surface. Like you can't access it without help. So if you want to think about levels of consciousness kind of like a giant iceberg, the stuff that is on the surface of the water is your conscious mind. That's everything you can see above the water. It's really easily accessible. It's right there ready for you to grasp it. And because it's right there, it's the stuff that you're doing on a regular basis. Like, you know, right now you're watching this, you know what you ate for breakfast this morning, you know what time you went to sleep last night. Those are all conscious thoughts. When we start doing the inner work, you know, we start getting into what's called the subconscious mind. And this is the stuff that's buried just below the surface of the water. Now, if we imagine this iceberg, this is like the stuff that if you were looking over the edge of a boat, you can still see it. It might be a little bit distorted because it's stuff that you are kind of seeing through the water. So it's a little bit murky, it's a little bit hazy, but it's still there. You can access it if you want to. And when most people do shadow work, this is as far as they're going to go because this is all they can access on their own. So you're going to be going into that subconscious mind to deal with things like the behaviors that you know that you do that you don't really like. Or maybe it's the traumas you remember, the things that are still kind of conscious, but you don't really want to think about them. We want to go a level deeper than that. And what we want to do with shadow work is access what's called the unconscious mind. Now, the unconscious is like the part of the iceberg that is so far below the surface of the water, you cannot see it. There's no way with the naked eye you can actually visualize the unconscious. And since this is just an analogy, imagine the fact that an iceberg in itself is usually the largest underneath the water. That's where the biggest portion of it is. In fact, if you guys have ever heard that funny statistic people talk about, like 90% of your brain is unused, it's because of the fact that 90% of your brain is unconscious memory, which means that it's still there, it's inside your head, but it's not easily accessible. It's something that's very hard to get to. And so when we're doing shadow work, which is the process of going into the unconscious mind, we are going into the depths of your soul. We're going about as far down as humanly possible. Depending on what you've experienced in your life, getting to those depths can either be really hard or really easy. It's just about how your body has learned to protect itself. Now, if any of you guys have ever experienced that little inner monologue, that little chirpy voice in the back of your head that we like to call the ego, that is a mechanism of your brain that is meant to protect you because it's stopping you from accessing the unconscious mind. Something people ask me all the time is, if we have built-in mechanisms to not access the unconscious mind, if we have something that's guarding the gates, why are we trying to bust through them? And the answer is that if we leave too much stuff in the unconscious mind, it starts to build and accumulate. And as it builds and accumulates, it starts to infringe upon our lives. It makes us sick. And so the ways that this can show up are both physical, mental, and energetic. So for most of us, it shows up as things like anxiety or depression. For a lot of people, it can be bigger. Things like autoimmune issues like lupus or multiple sclerosis. For me, it was cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. And it was because I was hiding so much stuff in the unconscious mind, burying it down and repressing it, that I was actually allowing it to make my body sick. Think about it as if your body is constantly trying to keep the doors of the unconscious mind closed. And if it's putting so much effort on stopping you from remembering that stuff, a lot of your body's energy systems are going to keep that door closed. And they can't be used for other things. And that's a huge problem for the way that your body operates, because we are not infinite in our energy. We're very finite. We only have a certain amount of energy to give to systems. So when we have severe anxiety or depression, it stops us from being able to do other things and eventually makes us even sicker. And so shadow work is near and dear to my heart because it is the thing that has made me feel whole again. It's the thing that stops me from feeling sick, from not having mental issues, from not having physical issues, because it allows me to kind of clear all of that stuff out, just pluck it out of my head and have it go away completely. Now, when we do shadow work, we really want to make sure that all the stuff that we're bringing up from the unconscious is stuff that we're healing in the moment. Because if you're bringing it up and not healing it, you're essentially just opening the door to re-traumatizing yourself, because trauma is a huge part of what lies within the unconscious mind. So when people do shadow work alone and they don't really know what it is that they're doing, what will very often happen is they'll bring up the worst moments from their lives, whether it is the moment that their parents told them they were divorcing, or the moment that they themselves had their heart broken, and they just have it sitting there raw in the conscious mind. And now it's like, okay, we brought it up to the surface, but there's nothing we can do with it. It's just there, sitting there, and it's making you even more crazy. We want to make sure when we do shadow work that we're going in and healing it fully. We'll get back to that in a little bit. I know there's a lot for me to cover today, so I'm trying to get as much in as possible, but that's a brief breakdown of what happens with shadow work and why it is that you want to do it. So there is a system that occurs inside of your body called the subconscious feedback loop. And this subconscious feedback loop essentially makes you who you are. It defines your personality and your behaviors. None of us are set in stone. For as many of us who, I know for me, I'm like, I'm a manifesting generator. This is how my energy shows up. Or I'm a Capricorn sun and this is really important for me. Or a Libra moon. Like all that stuff is important and it does help to define us, but it's not everything. Your unconscious mind truly defines everything about who you are, because it's like everything about you that has ever happened, all stored away, hidden from you. So it shapes how you see the world in ways that you can't even imagine. So I'm going to break it down so you understand as easily as possible. Every experience you have ever had in your life, in your past lives, is all in your unconscious mind. As you experience the world, what happens is you have sensory input. So maybe visually you're seeing something, maybe you're hearing the noise of it, smelling certain things, touching certain things. All of these different sensations help you experience a moment. And that kicks off a chain reaction in your body. So the brain, as you experience things, needs to figure out what to do with the stuff that you're experiencing. It'll base its reaction on your past reactions. So if you're having a sensory experience that triggers a memory of some sort, your brain will then start a chain reaction that follows in a similar suit. So let's say at 5 years old, you fell down the stairs and you were terrified. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to you. Let's say you are now somewhere up high, like you're visiting the top of the tallest building in the city that you're in, and you're getting near the edge. The sensory experience is you are up high, so your brain is seeing height. Your smell sensation is like feeling the air is a little bit colder, you're breathing it in. Everything is triggering that memory. And while you might not remember falling at 5 years old, what happens next is the emotions that pair with that past memory are going to kick into gear because your brain is going to allow that chain reaction. So the emotions that might come up with this are fear, anxiety, anger, shame, and guilt if it was something that you didn't mean to do and you didn't understand. When those emotions kick into gear in the brain, they're essentially just messengers for the body. And so those chemicals that are elicited in the brain are going to send a message down your spinal cord through what's called the enteric nervous system. This is going to send a message to your body about what to do. So if you fell down the stairs before and you're having this experience of being up high now, what will happen is as you're standing there, your body starts to get the message of this is a problem. This is not good. We don't like this. And your heart's going to start to race. Your palms are going to get sweaty. You're going to start to have so much tension build as your muscles tighten. You're going to feel everything clam up. Your brain might get a little fuzzy. You might feel like you need to freeze to protect yourself. And once this whole chain reaction starts and you're kicked into fight or flight, which is a part of your autonomic nervous system, now we need to complete that loop. So your body needs to send a message back up to the brain. And so it sends chemicals back up, completing the loop. These chemicals are actually messengers of thought. Most thoughts that you have, even though you think they're in your head, actually come from your gut. And so the thoughts that come back up are going to be things like, I don't like this. This is dangerous. This is bad. Run away. Get out of here. Stop. Don't go near the edge. And that's going to complete the loop. So now we have this very neat loop, right? Experiences create emotions, create physical reactions, create thoughts, which create new experiences. And this happens to you every single second of your life. With small things, with big things, it doesn't really matter. The reason why this is important is those initial experiences, like the time you fell down the stairs at 5 years old, are stored in your unconscious mind. So when you get to the top of that tallest building in your town, you don't know why you're freaking out. It doesn't make sense to you. You've never been to the top of a building before. You don't resonate with the idea of being afraid of heights. Like nothing is making sense. While this is a really big, exaggerated version of this is what happens to us every day. So you're going to be triggered by things on a daily basis that other people will not be triggered by. And this will stop you from being able to do anything you want to do. Like let's say you want to be a huge coach. You want to be a speaker. You want to be on stage. But if you remember standing up in your second grade class and having a moment where you couldn't speak, like nothing worked, your voice just stopped. And then that gets pushed down into your unconscious mind. Now every time you go to speak, nothing comes out. Or you fumble your words, or your heart is beating so fast you can't breathe enough to actually relay the amazing information that you have to share. It stops you from being able to show up as your best self. So all of this is to say that shadow work is going to be the thing that changes your life. Because when you do shadow work, we can actually completely change everything about your personality, your behaviors, and how you show up in the world. That sounds lofty, right? It sounds like a big thing. But I've worked with thousands of students on this, Casey included. And when you do your shadow work, you actually rewire your brain, your body, and your energy for success. Because you get rid of all the things that are stopping you from being able to show up how you want to. You're getting rid of the dead weight that exists that you don't realize is there. I think that's the biggest thing I've ever seen with people who are not doing their shadow work, is that they want to do certain things. They have these amazing ideas. They have these things they want to manifest, but it's like they're being weighted down. Like they have really, really heavy weights around their ankles. They keep trying to reach for the stars and they're being pulled down by their shadow and they can't figure out what to do. So shadow work is the way that we are able to change all of those things. If we can get rid of the stuff that exists within the unconscious mind, first off, you're no longer going to have any triggers. So none of those things that would normally bother you will ever bother you again. We're going to get rid of the things that weigh heavily on your body. So physically, you're going to be able to show up in a different way because you won't be sick anymore. If you were feeling anxious or depressed, none of that stuff will get to you anymore. It just can't. And in your brain, we are actually able to change your neural pathways, which is your brain's highway system. When we get in there and interrupt that subconscious feedback loop by changing the initial experiences that you had, we are literally changing the landscape of your mind. It's huge for showing up in the way that you need to. Somebody saying, I need this in my life, I'm loving this. I love it too. Obviously, this is just the most transformative thing that I've ever seen. Now, before I got into shadow work, I was a licensed psychotherapist, so I was working with people day in and day out on trying to change and better themselves. But we weren't getting to the root because we were getting stuck in the subconscious mind. We weren't actually changing anything because we can change your behaviors for a short-term period of time. But if we're not getting to the root, we're not really changing them. We're pausing them. We're altering course for small amounts of time until you eventually relapse because we didn't alter your brain, we didn't alter your body, and we didn't alter your energy. So the $1 million question here is, how do we actually do shadow work, right? You guys know everything about it now. So how do we start to practice this? Shadow work, in my opinion, and what I've seen from working with thousands of people, is best done when you can actually access the unconscious mind. You'll see plenty of people talking about shadow work and telling you that you can journal, which obviously I created a journal. I obviously believe that there's merit there, but it doesn't go as deep unless you access the unconscious. And there is a really easy way to do that. And it's through meditation. When we meditate, we're changing our body's natural vibration. And this is not like high vibe bullshit, right? Like you hear so many people going like, we're going to create high vibes. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. That's not real because as human beings, we go through high and low states every day. Even just with gravity stuff, like the moon is pulling energy in a different direction. So you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. You're not going to have a very high vibe day, and that's okay. That's not the point. What we want to focus on is your body's natural vibration state. And what we want to do when you meditate is get you to what are called theta brainwaves. Now, when we're active and like talking, you guys are all listening to what I have to say. You listened to Casey this morning. You have more speakers to listen to later. Your brain is actively working. And so your brain's thought patterns and your energy is going to be really dense and tightly coiled. It'll probably look something like this, right? Like really, really, really tight. When you're in a theta brainwave state, that tight coil loosens. It's like we're pulling this string out. Think about the way that you feel as you're drifting off to sleep at night. Kind of like relaxed, peaceful. Your thoughts are becoming a little bit more sporadic. You're losing sensation in your body as you allow your head to go somewhere else. That's where we want you to be. So to access the unconscious mind, all you have to do is meditate. And you're going to meditate to that point that it's kind of similar to how you feel when you're drifting off to sleep, because you're actually going into theta brainwaves when you're about to fall asleep. You're still conscious enough that if you needed to like get up and answer the phone, you could. But drifted off enough that your brain is really in that spaced out energetic state. And when you're there, all you need to do is set an intention to see whatever it is that you've been hiding from yourself. Now, I'm going to say this with a caveat because sometimes the things that you see are going to be really heavy. When we go into the shadow, there's like 4 facets to shadow work that I like to point out. The first one is inner child stuff. So you might see moments from your childhood that are not pretty, which is why it's been sorted into the unconscious mind. Things like hearing your parents fighting, things like getting hurt that maybe you don't remember getting dropped as a kid, but you did. Moments that were really heartbreaking for you as a child. So the inner child stuff will be there. And when I say inner child, it doesn't mean before age 12. It could be before age 18. The brain in itself is not really matured until between 18 and 25 years old. So inner child for me is any moments like pre-20 years old. You could see that stuff. Also, every time you go back there, you could also find ancestral work. Now, what this would look like is it's like not your life that you're tapping into. It's the lives of those who have come before you. So this could be your mom's lineage or your dad's lineage. I do find for women, we tend to tap into mom's lineage more because we carry the genetic memories literally in ourselves. And the way that that works is that all of us have lived inside of our grandmothers and her mother and so on and so forth. Because when we are just a teeny little egg inside of an embryo, we are inside of our mother's ovaries. And then when she is a baby, she's inside of her mother's ovaries. So we carry genetic memory. Everything that our grandmothers experienced throughout their lifetime, your mother experienced, and so did you. And we carry that. There's a process, actually a field of research called epigenetics that studies this phenomenon. In fact, when you are born, you're already born with certain DNA kind of switched on or switched off like a light switch. That means that you're either more likely to get sick, less likely to get sick, more likely to get anxious, less likely, more likely to have autoimmune issues, and so on and so forth. And we can switch that light switch on and off by doing ancestral healing, because you need to go in there and actually heal from the thing that caused it in the first place. And we can show with genetic markings that we've done that. This is the reason why there have been plenty of twin studies where we take 2 twins who were separated at birth and they end up looking different even though they're identical. Because if one of them had trauma and the other one did not, those genetic markers switch on or switch off. They could look completely different hair color, different height, different eye color. Even though genetically they're the same, they should be identical. It's wild. So generational traumas coming through with ancestral healing is another thing that we could see in the shadow. The next one that I'd love to point out, especially when I'm talking to women, is womb work. We carry so much trauma in our womb space, it's insane. Now, if you guys are familiar with the chakra system, we have 7 major chakras lined through the center of our body, and these are essentially energy centers. And because of where they're located, they correlate with certain types of trauma. So that imaginary scenario I told you guys about in 2nd grade where you stood up and you couldn't speak, that is probably stuck inside the throat chakra, and it would impact how you show up in speaking arrangements as an adult. Womb trauma can be any moment in your lifetime where you've been questioned because of your gender, because of your sexuality, because of your sexual preferences. It could be moments that have happened to you, like abuse, things that have gotten stuck in that womb center. It could be medical traumas. All of this stuff gets stuck inside of the womb. And so for women in particular, it's really important to do womb work, which comes up through shadow work. And so you'd be specifically going back to the moments where your womb had issues. This shows up in so many different medical ways for us as women that are just written off, like endometriosis, PCOS, cervical cancer, HPV. It just gets stuck in that area, and we can heal you from the inside out with this work. So that's the next one. And then the last one, which is my personal favorite for 1,000 reasons, is past life work. I'm going to tell you why it's my favorite. The reason why I love past life work is think about all the things you've experienced. Let's say you're 30 years old or 40 years old, and you have a lifetime of experiences that you've gone through, and so many more still to come. Multiply that by 100, or 1,000, or 10,000. Depending on how old your soul is, you are carrying around all the unconscious memories of every lifetime that has ever existed. And so there are certain things that we can't heal for you in this lifetime. We have to go back to your past, and we have to find it. And we can do that with past life-oriented shadow work. So all the moments, like let's say that second grade, you couldn't speak, you're standing in front of the class thing, you heal that, right? And it's still not getting better. Like you're still unable to speak in front of a group. Now let's go back to your past lives. We might find a number of past lives where you were in positions where you had to speak and things happened to you because of it. Some things that I've seen doing past life work with women are that they were witches in past lives and they literally were killed because of it. Like one I'm thinking of in particular, a woman spoke to a neighbor about her healing, just like potions and gardening. Nothing crazy, right? The witch wound. So they're talking about this to a neighbor. The neighbor tells her husband. The husband tells the town. They come for her. She ends up getting beaten half to death and drowned in the river by her house. Why would she ever want to speak again? It doesn't make any sense, right? Our past lives carry so much of our trauma. And they also carry so much of our soul's purpose. Because when we go back and we see those past lives, we get to learn about what it is that we're meant to do. If you see, let's say, 10 of your past lives, you'll find a really obvious common thread amongst them all. And when you see that, you know what it is that you're meant to do in this lifetime. I don't know if you guys have ever read this book. It's one of my favorites. It's called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton. He talks about regressing people through hypnosis to the space in between lives. So before you're reincarnated, after you died in a past life, you get to just be in that space and see what's going on. And he talks so much with the people who he's regressing about how important those past life experiences are on our current life, because they dictate exactly how it's going to go. So those are the 4 facets of shadow work. We have inner child, we have ancestral, we have womb healing, and we have past life work. And for anybody that I'm rushing through this for, remember I have that book Shadow Work coming out this fall that you can pre-order now on Amazon. I'm going to go into so much detail on this, so much detail. So when you do past life work or any type of shadow work, you're going to go back to these moments and they're going to be heavy. There's a reason they're in your unconscious mind. It's not an accident that they found their way there. So it's so important that you make space for healing while you're in that unconscious space. Now, when you're doing this by yourself, you can do that in a variety of different methods. Some of the easiest ways that I've found to do that when you're doing it yourself are to do simple things like cord cuttings so that you're releasing your energy and detaching it from the energy of what existed. You can also call in spirit guides and ask them to assist, really just sending healing energy in there. Or you can trust yourself and just ask yourself, how do I need to heal in this moment? What is it that I need to do to alter this in my brain so that it doesn't stick there anymore? And when you do that, it'll have the ripple effect of changing it in your body and in your energy. When you call upon your own healing gifts and you ask yourself what it is that you need to do, what almost always happens is you see the chain of events that have occurred since. You see how it's impacted you in your current life, or if it's something from this lifetime, how it's impacted you later on in that same life. And when you can see that thread and it becomes so obvious, you can just make a little shift. It's almost like being on train tracks, right? And as you're moving forward on those train tracks, doing shadow work is like hitting the button and switching lanes. And every time you do that, it's going to move you closer to what it is that you desire for yourself, your dream life, your soul's purpose. In fact, doing shadow work for all these years, I didn't realize it early. It was not one of the things that I planned, but I found over time that shadow work is, in my opinion, the missing link in the manifestation process. Now, for anybody who's familiar with manifestation, the idea is that every possible limitless idea of what your life could look like exists within something called the quantum field. The quantum field is a term from physics that kind of suggests that there is no time. Everything exists and it's all happening simultaneously. And in order to quantum leap or hop timelines, all you have to do is envision the life that you want to have and align yourself with it. So let's say you want to be a really inspirational, motivational speaker, and that is the dream that you see for yourself. You see yourself in the future walking across stages with huge, huge groups of people watching you. You see this, you feel it in your body, you know that it's yours. If you haven't done shadow work, you can align with that vision all you want. But every opportunity that shows up for you to get you to that place, you will resist and deny because it scares the shit out of you. And it's a trigger. And it's because of your unconscious mind. So the opportunities themselves will pass you by and they'll go to other people. Somebody else will get the opportunity to walk on that stage and you'll sit in the audience and watch them and wish it was yours. This is why shadow work is so important. If you want to manifest that future reality that you know is yours and you feel like you can call in, you have to do the shadow work. Because when you do that, you're going to rewire your brain, your body, and your energy for that exact success that you're trying to call in. And once you've done that stuff, manifestation becomes a cinch. I've been talking a little bit about that book that I have coming out next year. I'm going to give you guys one of the stories that I tell inside the book. So a couple years ago, I knew that I wanted to be someone who had a platform. I knew I wanted to be able to speak to people about shadow work. I'm really passionate about it. But until I did an Akashic Records reading with one of my friends, who was actually one of my students through Create Your Light Academy, I never really thought about writing a book. As a kid, I used to write books. I wanted to be an author, but that was like the childish dream that I passed off and let go. And when I did this Akashic Records session with her, I'd already done all my shadow work, so I was able to pull all that weight off of me. There was nothing holding me back. So I was able to align with the vision of me being an author. So all I did was envision it for a little while, and then one day Barnes & Noble called me. I didn't have an agent, I didn't have a book proposal, I didn't have people feeling out the idea of me writing a book, literally nothing. Barnes & Noble called me and said, "You're the person we want to speak about shadow work. You seem to be the voice of this generation for that. Can you write this book for us?" It's that simple. When you get your shadow out of the way and there's nothing weighing you down and holding you back, nothing can stop your manifestations from occurring. So that's everything I wanted to tell you guys about shadow work. I want to answer some of your questions here. So I'm going to go back here in the comments and start answering them from a little while back, but please feel free to ask some questions now. So lots of comments here about it. Casey said, "I've gone to the craziest places with you." Shadow work is wild. Emily says, "So good. This is giving me words from my own experience and meditation. Amazing." Okay, this is a good one. So Shelly says, "I fall asleep every time I meditate." And this is one of the subjects that I talk about the most on TikTok, which is one of my favorite platforms, because it is so common and it's actually because of shadow. So let's talk about the body's natural evolutionary response to trauma. If there is something hidden within your shadow, stuffed in there in the unconscious mind, the body and the brain do not want you to access it because you could unintentionally hurt yourself. So if you were to open up those floodgates, you could potentially re-traumatize yourself and make your life worse. As that, factor from evolutionary standpoint kicks in, it's like, we don't want her to see that. So we're going to kick her into sleep. And so there's an override button essentially inside of your brain that will not allow you to stay in a theta brainwave state without falling asleep because of this. Now, if you want to access your shadow, but you fall asleep every time you do it, it's best to use someone to take you through it, to use a guide, a mentor, someone who's going to be there with you, because they will be actively keeping you awake while keeping you in that theta brainwave state. And whatever the biggest thing, whatever the big gigantic thing is that your body is so terrified of you seeing, that's the thing you're going to heal first. And once you do it once, it changes everything. One of my recent rounds of Create Your Light Academy, I had a woman from Dubai in the group, and this was just this past January that she was enrolled. So we're doing shadow work, we're starting it off, and immediately she's falling asleep every time. And she tells me she's been working with the same spiritual mentor for years. Same thing happens. Every time they meditate, she's out, right? Not good. So I do a session with her. I'm actively walking her through it and making sure she stays awake. And when we take her back, we immediately see some pretty violent deaths. And when we see those, we're able to take it and make it separate from her. So it's not like she herself is experiencing those deaths. It's sort of like she's witnessing them. Like they're existing and she's existing over here. And with this detachment, we were able to look at it more critically and kind of go, what's the lesson here? What is it that you're meant to learn? How is it showing up in your life? How is it keeping you afraid? And when we were able to see this, she was able to heal it. So now when she meditates, she can do it on her own. She's in her unconscious mind in about 2 seconds. When you start to practice shadow work, it does not take long. Like when I first start doing this work with people, it's like 15 minutes of meditation to get you there. By the time we're wrapping up, it should be like 30 seconds and you're there. Or sometimes even like close your eyes and you're there. That's how we know we did our job. So if you're someone who falls asleep all the time, understand that that is because there's something traumatic in the shadow that your brain and your body do not want you to see. And the best way to do that is work with a guide. Okay, so moving on, geeking out on this. I'm glad. Okay, powerful, blah, blah, blah. I know I have an old soul. Most of us do have old souls. Most of us have lived many, many times, and not even just on this planet. I said Hay House, haha, Barnes & Noble. I feel like every person who has a spiritual book is Hay House, but there's actually a section of Barnes & Noble's publishing house called Sterling Ethos that's all spiritual books, which is super cool. Okay, I don't know how to empty or quiet my thoughts to get into meditating. So if you have a mind that's really, really loud when you're meditating and it's like your brain is not stopping, that's another sign that your body is trying to prevent you from seeing the shadow because it doesn't know what you're going to find and it doesn't want you to find it. Don't see that as the enemy. In fact, see it as your friend. When you close your eyes, if your brain starts going, keep a pen and a piece of paper near you and just start writing down what you hear. What you're going to do is what's called a brain dump. So everything that's coming up, even if it's like a grocery list or like you forgot to turn the lights off in the car yesterday, you're going to write it down. And as you write it down, you're going to clear that space. You're going to do this over and over again every single time you meditate. And eventually you're going to get to the point where your brain is like, oh, we don't really have anything left to say. There's nothing else we have to tell her. And when you get to that point, you're going to be able to do the things you're trying to do. Another alternative way to do this, to get yourself ready to go into this mode, is to do scrying. Now, scrying is the process of staring at something. The really stereotypical way of thinking about it is like divination back in the day with a crystal ball, where you see the psychic peering into her crystal ball. It doesn't have to be that corny. You can look into a flame. That's one of my favorites. It's called fire scrying. So it could be flame in a candle. It could be like a fireplace flame. You can do water scrying where you stare into water. You can do mirror scrying where you stare in a mirror. The idea here is that your eyes are open. So when your eyes are open, you're essentially tricking your brain into feeling like this is a safe way to meditate. You don't have to worry about closing your eyes and having all these thoughts flood through. They're just going to come through and you're going to let them go as they come. You start with a timer, like set a timer for 2 minutes and let yourself fire scry or water scry for 2 minutes. You need to build it up and build it up and build it up until you're doing it for about 10 to 15 minutes. Eventually your brain is going to run out of things to say. That's the goal. It's not about pushing that stuff out of the way. I don't know where that idea came from. Other people that I talk to who are huge yogis and meditation masters also say the same thing. The goal is not to make your brain quiet. Your goal is to let all the stuff that your brain is dying to tell you come through, acknowledge it, let your brain know you're listening, and then to let it go. I like to write it all down on a piece of paper just so I'm really telling my brain and my body, I hear you. I hear you, and I'm not going to ignore you. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so Rachel says, I need to do some deep shadow work around money. This is such a common one. I do a lot of money mindset work, but I still feel so blocked. I'm thinking there's something deeper. I am sorry to say this for any of the mindset coaches out there, but mindset work is bullshit. It's bullshit. Because, and there's a reason for this, mindset work is accessing the subconscious mind, which you guys know from the beginning of this talk, is not as deep as you need to go. It's the same thing as cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something that I was trained to do throughout my graduate school degree. When we're doing mindset work or cognitive behavioral therapy, we are essentially changing things for the short term without dealing with the root. So let's say, I see this all the time with things like eating disorders, where we have someone who has an eating disorder, we change their behaviors, and over time they go back to their old ways because we never actually got to the root of the problem, which was growing up in a household where their mother made them feel inadequate and always commented on their body and their weight. Or maybe it goes even further back than that. If we're not dealing with the root, we're never getting to it. So mindset work feels really frustrating for a lot of people who engage with it, who have shadow to deal with, because it's not getting to the root of the problem. Mindset work can be really helpful for people who don't have a lot of shadow around the particular issues that they're facing. So if you don't carry a lot of money baggage and finances are not an issue for you, and you do mindset work on being a millionaire, it's going to go great because it's not actually a problem that's existing within your shadow. But if you feel like you're getting blocked on that over and over and over again, I bet if we were to go into a past life, we would find you living in poverty. Or conversely, find you extremely rich and having a horrible life because of it. Money comes with so many strings, and it really shouldn't, because money is just a tool. That's all that it is. Money is a tool, just like everything else that exists in our world. But because it's something that's so loaded and so heavy societally, it tends to have an emotional charge to it. So we get into that unconscious mind stuff, it alters your subconscious feedback loop, and you have trouble maintaining money or sticking with money or letting yourself have money and hold it. So shadow work is definitely something that'll help there. I own so many books, but I have a resistance for reading. I feel like so many people say this all the time. I love reading, so this one's hard for me to relate to. But there's things like Audible and other experiences that you can have. But I might even be curious to have you do a shadow work session and find out why you hate reading, because almost every time we're going to see something where you're like 6 years old and your first grade teacher makes you feel bad because you can't read and everybody else in your class is ahead of you. And once we have that shame that's attached to it, now reading is the enemy. And theoretically, you want to read. But in reality, your body is like, nope, not doing that. We're not into it. Okay, let's see. Is the process of doing shadow work similar to hypnosis? Yes. The major difference that I find between hypnosis and shadow work is that with hypnosis, you cannot just get up and walk away. You can't just stop doing it in the middle. It's like something's kind of taken over your body. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I actually really like hypnosis. The one area where I find that it's difficult is with trauma survivors, which most people who end up doing shadow work are. In fact, most people are in different ways. If you have a lot of trauma and you feel like you don't have control of your body, think about how traumatizing that experience can be in itself. So for instance, if you've been the victim of sexual assault, which there's 40 of you guys watching right now, statistically, the majority of you have had some kind of sexual assault in your lifetime. I have multiple times. When that happens, a process called dissociation occurs, where it's like all of our energy moves up our spinal cord and out of our crown chakra, taking us out of our lower energy centers. This is an evolutionary feature to keep us safe, but it also causes us to have a lot of issues with our body, with our sexuality, with orgasm, the list goes on. So if you were to go into hypnosis, even to heal something like that, the process is going to, again, take you out of your body through your crown chakra. And when you're disconnected from your body and re-experiencing a trauma, we're not healing it, we're reinforcing it. So that's the one area where it's a little bit different. What's an example of things that could come up around money and shadow work? This is one that I see all the time. So one example, and I'll tell you guys about a former client of mine. She's given me permission to speak about her case. She's a prominent business owner in Philadelphia. She's actually one of my good friends now. I tend to befriend most of my students because I love them. And she has always had trouble letting money just flow. So while her businesses themselves have been really lucrative, she'll spend the money immediately. And so it's not like she's actually holding it. So to the outside world, it looks like she's doing amazing. But inside, she is paycheck to paycheck and dying over it. So she did create Your Light Academy about 3 years ago, and we found that she had a past life as a prostitute in London. And during that past life, she was homeless. And so she would spend her time living in like a crack in a wall. Like, that's the only way to describe it. It sort of looks like someone like blew out a hole in the wall. It's like a little cubby space for her. And she would sleep there. It was like in the back of an alley. She was by herself, no family. And so when she would have money, she would immediately need to spend it on all the stuff that she needed. Like, she needed fresh clothes. She'd been living in a hole in a wall through horrible weather, rain, wind, all that stuff. She would need to spend it on food. She was starving. And unfortunately, she also did drugs at that time. So because of all those things, even when she was making decent money from prostitution, it was immediately going out the door. See the connection? When she was doing it in that past life, she was doing it in this life. And when she was able to heal from that need to get rid of the money that she was making, she was able to heal it here. And now 3 years later, she's doing incredibly well, not just to everybody else, but also for herself. Okay, I'm on the beach with this book right now. Yay! Okay, I know I have repressed memories. We all do, I promise. And can meditate and go deeply inside, but then terror takes over. That's a shadow response. I don't know if I have a question. Maybe there's hope I can heal this. Yes, that's a sign you need to do your shadow work. That's a normal response. That fear is kind of like a preview into what it is that you're going to find. Not to scare you, but like a lot of the stuff that exists within our unconscious mind is heavy stuff. But the really saving grace here is that when you are kind of separate from it, like you're somewhere else physically in your body, mentally, time-wise, in a different place, it doesn't feel as bad as it did when it occurred. So even though we're going back and re-experiencing horrific moments, it feels like a slight version of them. So for instance, I've seen people have to go to the guillotine in France. I've seen people get buried alive. I've seen people kidnapped as children. And it's not like it's happening to them now. It's like instead of seeing it at level 10, they're seeing it at a 4. And we can actually work to keep your body really calm while you're experiencing it, because you can see all the pieces of the puzzle and how they connect. It's especially easy with inner child work because most of the time as kids, we blow things way out of proportion. We think things are huge when they're really kind of small. But as a 4-year-old, everything's big. Dropping your ice cream cone on the sidewalk is massive. So it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. But if you don't deal with it, that fear is still existing in your body at a level 10. And that means that every time you come up to a trigger that's at least slightly similar, your body kicks into gear like you are experiencing a level 10 trauma, which is exactly what could make you sick and what we want to avoid. So do not hesitate to do your shadow work. Okay, I don't remember childhood memories. This is one of the biggest topics I've ever had on TikTok, one of my biggest conversation starters, because so many people have this experience and nobody realized how common it is. You should have memories from age 3 or 4. And if you don't, there's a reason you don't, and it's trauma. And what happens with the brain is that when we're repressing things into the unconscious mind, it's hard for the brain to determine like how to separate things out. So it's not as simple as sorting things into neat little boxes. So when you have a lot of trauma in your childhood, it's like we're stuffing that box so much that things flood out over onto the sides. So then your brain goes, okay, we need to make more space. And it starts grabbing stuff from the outside, pulling in and going, we'll just hide all this. And then more comes, we'll just hide all this. And it keeps growing and expanding. So many people that I've encountered don't have memories before age 7, sometimes even before age 12. That's just a sign that you need to do shadow work. And it definitely does not mean that when you do shadow work, you won't be able to access it. Because you will. You'll be able to see every piece of it vividly. And we'll be working to keep your body so calm that it's not like you're experiencing it at that level 10 trauma anymore. So know first off that there's hope. This is not something that you have to live with, but do know that it's not normal and something that you should deal with. Definitely healthier for you. Okay, a couple more questions because we are running out of time and I want to make sure we honor everybody who's going to be speaking at this. So Ashley says, I know there's always hope, but it's been a lot lately. I feel tired of what feels like a slow process of waiting to realize my dreams because of my trauma. That's exactly why I love shadow work. You know, I worked as a psychotherapist for over a decade, and I would have people come to see me for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, and we'd be dealing with the same problems in different packaging over and over again. When I started doing shadow work, I was seeing those same people for 6 sessions and it was going away. Like, poof, completely gone. The issues they came to see me for 7, 8 years ago, gone, like they never existed. Shadow work heals things rapidly because it gets to the root source. We are literally getting to the deepest layer of it and pulling it out at the source so you don't have to keep dealing with it. And if you feel like you're continuing to deal with it, it's not all the way done. There's more shadow that needs to be found. You have to go deeper, which is my specialty. All right, let's see. Same childhood stuff. Mindset can be frustrating. Yeah, I know, it's really annoying. At 60 years old, I realized I don't like speaking on live. It's because my stepfather taped my mouth shut and told me no one wants to hear me. First off, I'm so sorry to hear that you had that experience. That's horrific. Absolutely horrific. And it explains so much, right? If you have this idea, like your body literally remembers the feeling of tape over your mouth, the feeling that nobody wants to hear you, that's sickening. And your body feels that sickness stuck inside of it. And so when you go to speak and you say things, even if they're really profound, it feels like you don't want to be saying them. It's so important to do that shadow work. And again, Georgette, I'm sending you so much love. That's horrible that that happened. Let's see. Absolutely Spiritual Awakening. Listen to this. I'm so glad. Love you. okay, let's say completely, I've lived a lot of my life dissociated without realizing it until I started healing and therefore being in my body. Yeah, it's super scary at first, but it is massive, the shift that happens when you do. I have a hard time remembering, but there are moments I do remember that I feel had an impact on me. And not everything is sorted into the unconscious. Some things do stay in that subconscious mind where they're easily accessible if you want to dig. And that's where the work can start for a lot of people. That's where doing things like shadow work, journaling with something like this bad boy can help you start to do, especially if you're scared. You can start getting into that subconscious. Elizabeth says, so are you taking clients? Yes, I have a group program. It's called Create Your Light Academy. I work with groups, and there's a specific reason for this. When you're going through the worst things your soul has ever experienced, it's so much more powerful to have 9 or 10 women there with you going, we love you, we're there with you, I've gone through the same thing, I can hold you through it. I will only do this work in a group for that reason. I used to work one-to-one, and I would find that afterwards, like you only have me for a short period of time, it would feel like there was something missing, like there's something more that you needed. So my group program, Create Your Light Academy, runs for 2 months. We do 8 weeks of shadow work. It's intense, it's deep, it's powerful. And the way that I structure the 8 weeks is that we're hitting all those different 4 facets of shadow work twice at 2 different angles. So you're gonna make sure that you pull everything out. The sessions are also recorded for you, so you can do them again and again and again and again to get rid of everything that you need to, because you're always gonna see something different every time you go into the shadow. Like I said, you probably had thousands of lifetimes. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there. But I do find that you don't really need more than 8 sessions to get rid of the big ones. The biggest things that are holding you back, usually we're wrapping up by week 6 or 7. And the people who go through Create Your Light Academy will say that people will tell them they look different. That they literally, like, physically look different. They look younger, they look more vibrant. Did they get a haircut? Like, what's going on with them? They seem different because they are. It's unbelievable how much shadow work will change you. I can't even describe it. It's just the most powerful thing. If it's something you're interested in learning more about, you guys know my Instagram handle is the same as my name. It's just I-A-M, Danielle Massi. On Facebook, you have me right here. I know I didn't get to all the questions, but I want to make sure we honor the next person's time. I'm happy to answer every question that you guys have. Just send them to me over on Instagram or right here on Facebook. I also have a Facebook group where I talk loads about shadow work, have lots of free trainings, all kinds of things you guys can dive into. It's called the Clarity Club with Danielle Massi. I've got my Shadow Seekers Journal, which you can pick up right now on Amazon, and the newly released pre-order book available through Barnes & Noble called Shadow Work. That's going to be coming out this fall. I'm going to be doing a multi-city tour. I'm so excited for this. It's definitely a dream of mine. I cannot wait to share more shadow work stuff with every one of you. And thank you guys for hopping on and being so completely vulnerable in your comments. I love you all so much. And thank you, Casey, for having me. I'll see you guys all later. Bye, everybody.